Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Unlocking What Really Drives Consumer Behavior, Breaking the Demographic Mold. I'm Alina Strugut. I'm a Principal Analyst and Research Director here at Lux, and I'm thrilled to be moderating today's session. Presenting today is my colleague, Cheryl Auger. She's a Senior Director here at Lux, and let me tell you, Cheryl is a force. She brings a rare mix of sharp cultural insight, strategic thinking, and some of you who know her, you know that she brings the kind of contagious energy that makes data feel downright delightful. And today, she'll be diving into one of the most exciting topics in consumer insights right now. What drives consumer behavior? It's not assumption, it's not about stereotypes, but the deeper beliefs and emotional triggers that move people to act, all the good stuff. And throughout the webinar, you can type any questions you have in the questions box on your screen. Time permitting, we will try to answer all the questions that we can, but if your question doesn't get answered, please don't hesitate to email it to questions@luxresearch.com. So that's questions@luxresearch.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Now, if at any point you experience technical difficulties, such as a frozen screen, please refresh your browser and check that your internet connection is strong. So grab your notebook, your favorite beverage, and let's get into it. Here's Cheryl.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Alina. As Alina noted, we'll be talking today about what drives consumer behavior, moving beyond demographics. What you can expect from the next half hour or so includes a deeper understanding of consumer motivations to effectively design products and messaging that aligns with consumers on that really deep emotional level. We are going to talk about creating personas, lead consumers, or even ideal consumer profiles based on their shared beliefs and motivations, since it's those beliefs that drive behavior. Now, of course, demographics are helpful, and we're not suggesting that we don't need them, but we are arguing that we need to develop a more sophisticated understanding of the modern consumer in an increasingly fragmented world in order to stay ahead of some of the key trends and opportunities that are emerging. Before I get into it, I want to start with a question to illustrate my point. And my question is, what do King Charles, the current monarch in England, and Gene Simmons, frontman for Kiss, and one could argue King of Shock Rock, have in common? And you may be thinking, I don't know, they don't seem to have much in common based on this image. But let me tell you, both King Charles and Gene Simmons are male. They were raised in the UK. They were both married twice. They're both affluent. In fact, they both live in castles. And they were born a year apart in 1948 and 1949, making them both part of the baby boomer generation. Now, despite those similarities, we can note by looking at their images, they don't seem all that alike. And in fact, that's because they represent different core values. Charles represents respect for tradition, appreciation for duty, service, and legacy, while Gene Simmons represents unapologetic individuality, freedom of expression, and anti-establishment attitudes. Not surprisingly, they attract different types of people based on the values that they represent. And we likely wouldn't target a Gene Simmons and a King Charles in the same way. So my next question is, why is it that we consistently ask, how could we better target boomers, millennials, or more recently, really focusing on targeting Gen Z, rather than focusing on the shared values or core beliefs that drive interest in our products and service in the first place? So that brings me to my core argument, which is demographics alone do not define consumers. They offer valuable but ultimately insufficient information when it comes to creating a target that's going to resonate. And this is where we need an anthropological approach to help us develop a deeper understanding of consumers to improve our targeting when it comes to both product development and communication. So in terms of my talk and how we're going to spend the next little while, we'll start out by ensuring we're aligned on the same page when it comes to why we even need to target in the first place. From there, we'll talk about the benefits and the value of using a demographic-based approach, but we'll also get into the limitations and why we need to think beyond demographics in the modern world. That's where anthropology comes in. It offers a wonderful solution to help us take a more human-centric approach to targeting and persona development by allowing us a methodology that gets to those deep motivations and shared beliefs. Of course, we want to bring this to life using some case studies. We'll take a look at artificial intelligence as well as clean eating to help illustrate these points further. All right, let's start by ensuring we're on the same page. Why does targeting matter? Well, without a target, we're often just guessing. Targeting helps to create clarity. It helps to ensure that we know who we're speaking to in order to craft content, products, experiences that really resonate functionally and emotionally. Furthermore, having a target in mind when it comes to product development helps R&D and innovation teams design features, pricing, experiences that are intended to solve real problems or deliver real joy for the right audience. It helps us to avoid creating things that are cool, but potentially irrelevant to actual consumers. Furthermore, having a focus helps us to be more efficient with our resources. These days, especially, marketing and innovation budgets are not infinite. We have limited resources. So targeting allows us to focus our resources on areas where they'll have most impact. That is, targeting helps us to navigate complex sales environments by connecting more meaningfully with consumers. It can help our team align on a vision and ensure we're working to the same purpose. A well-defined consumer helps us narrow our media choices, creative messaging, product development, and partnerships. So ultimately, having a target can help us win with the right message at the right time for the right people, right? So we definitely need a target to ensure we're using our resources wisely. And often we use demographics to help us with that initial targeting. In fact, demographics have been used in market research and innovation for a very long time, and with good reason. They help us with scoping and market size. Demographics help us understand how big is a potential market. We may need to know how many urban millennial parents are out there, women over 45 or Gen Z college students, in an effort to ensure that we can estimate demand, distribution reach, as well as product viability. As I already mentioned, demographics are great when it comes to that early stage persona development. Age, gender, income, education are all really helpful in identifying or understanding the target consumer that we're creating. It creates a baseline profile that we can then continue to develop with psychographic, motivational, or behavioral data. Having an understanding of demographics also has the ability to create a common language across different teams. It can help us to align our stakeholders from marketing, product, and leadership teams. It helps to make abstract ideas and segments easier to communicate and align around. Furthermore, demographics, while it can be costly to do research and understand them, they're highly observable, making it the foundation of marketing and product planning for many, many years. However, increasingly, many of our clients are realizing that demographics are just a starting point. And I really love Marcus Collins' new book, For the Culture, The Power Behind What We Buy, What We Do, and Who We Want to Be. And in it, he eloquently argues demographics provide discrete boxes to put people into and help us make the world neat. Demographics, while factual, don't accurately describe who people are. And he goes on to argue that we need to understand those shared beliefs that drive behavior in order to do a better job understanding consumers. And I completely agree. And this is because demographics, while very helpful, have limitations, right? And as such, they need to be augmented with some additional human-centric research to drive that more meaningful innovation as well as communication, right? And some of the limitations include things like missing out on the emotional context. Demographics can't capture values, beliefs, identities, or even the aspirations that really drive behavior and, in particular, purchase decisions. Furthermore, if we're overly anchored in a demographic-based approach, we run the risk of stereotyping consumers or being seen as out of touch, right? If we rely too heavily on demographics, we run the risk of reinforcing outdated assumptions while limiting possibilities about people. For example, we might come to the conclusion that women over 50 aren't tech savvy, which is a stereotype. Furthermore, as I mentioned, over-reliance on demographics can contribute to products and campaigns that just feel like they're out of touch to the modern consumer. Let me give you a couple of examples. One is a little bit older, but I think it's illustrative. For example, Bics for her pens. They released a line of pink pens and targeted women with their pink pens. And not surprisingly, many women said, you know, I can't just be reduced to a color. My needs are a little bit more complex. Also, I believe this is stereotyping women. Well, some men responded by saying, hey, just because I'm a man doesn't mean I can't use pink either. Another more recent example is the Pepsi, and I say this with much love in my heart. I am a big snack and soda consumer. But the Pepsi commercial featuring Kendall Jenner in a protest was widely criticized as not only being out of touch, but also for appropriating the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that were taking place following police shootings and challenges around racial relationships. And not surprisingly, the ad faced so much backlash that it was pulled almost immediately. So my argument here is that getting that deeper understanding of people's motivations can help us to avoid some of those mistakes. But beyond that, demographics are limiting because they don't represent the evolution of life stages or the fluidity that we're seeing in modern identities. Gender, family, even community structures are increasingly fluid. For example, age doesn't dictate behavior in the way it once did. A 60-year-old might be starting a business, backpacking solo, or even learning to code. Demographics, again, while helpful, they may limit innovation because we may overlook emerging needs. We may overlook some of the cultural shifts that are changing consumer expectations if we're overly focused on those demographics, right? So again, it's not to say we don't need demographics or analytics. These are very helpful, but we need to go a step beyond that. And this is where anthropology can play a central role. Cultural anthropology helps us to create a more human-centered approach, and it can help us to build on some of those demographic findings, right? So again, what we're doing when we're doing cultural anthropology is ethnographic observation. It's a way to fill some of those gaps left by a demographic approach while driving better business decisions. right? And this is because anthropology, doing ethnographic observation, helps us to get beyond what people say or even do and digs into the why. Why are they doing the things that they do? And in particular, we look at the why within the context of shared values, beliefs, and rituals, which helps to reveal what we might describe as invisible forces that are shaping consumer behavior, right? So we're using observation to help us create personas that are more layered, human, and predictive. And at Lux, we conduct observational analysis of the conversations that consumers are having online, regardless of observation, in order to decode the why behind the big trends that we're seeing, behind the behaviors that we're seeing, to get that deeper understanding of consumers' shared mindset and to get the why behind the what. We do this by collecting millions of data points every month, month over month, to get a representative sample of consumers. We're looking at the natural language that they're using large language models, natural language processing, to help us to ensure that we have that rich nuance and that deep understanding, while also getting to a large N and a representative sample. We're looking at places where consumers can be anonymous, where they're engaged in long-form discussion. There must be a back and forth. Just the hashtag isn't what we're looking at here. And beyond that, we're not only looking at direct mentions, but we're looking at the broader associations and the broader context that's meaningful to consumers, again, to help us understand those invisible forces at the heart of consumer behavior and engagement in trends. This allows us to help our clients to create more human-centered personas. And we do this by looking at consumer belief systems, not just their behaviors. We get to that why, as I mentioned, behind consumer actions, enabling brands to anticipate deeper motivations rather just constantly reacting to surface level behaviors. This allows us to help us build personas that are richer, more predictive, and better aligned with how people are really and truly making decisions today. This can be on anything and everything that consumers are talking about. I'll give you a recent example. One of our clients messaged me noting that they were seeing astrology everywhere. People were constantly talking about what their sign was. And she wondered, what is going on here? Why do I see so many people engaged in astrology? And the surface level is it's a fun distraction. But when we did just a quick bit of research, what we found was many consumers were looking for a shared sense of belonging. They were turning to their astrological sign because it's not fraught. It hasn't been politicized when so many other identity markers have. And so again, it's just a simple example that helps to illustrate how we can move beyond surface level understanding to really drive action or to help understand what's driving action. We're also always looking to spot cultural shifts, emerging trends, but not only to understand what those trends are, but to understand the lead consumer, the people who are driving those trends, who are pushing trends forward. What are their motivations and what are their expectations for those trends? All of the deliverables that we do, all of our syndicated work is intended to help our clients get that deeper understanding of what matters to consumers and why it matters to consumers. So for example, in our 5 key trends for 2025, we highlighted some of the big trends that would be influential this year, from healthy aging to affordability and even slow living as a key lifestyle trend for the year. But we didn't only share the trends, we also identified why these trends are meaningful to consumers. What's motivating consumers to engage with these trends in the first place? And this is helpful in ensuring we understand not just what a trend is, but where culture is heading in a broad sense. We, as I mentioned, use AI to help us to manage a huge amount of data. It also helps us to create some analytic output. We can measure cultural meaning, relevance, and maturity. And assessing an idea's cultural meaning and stage of adoption helps our clients and brands more generally prioritize the beliefs that are gaining traction as opposed to those that are losing relevance. Again, this helps to ensure that personas are grounded in timely, resonant insights rather than outdated assumption. And lastly, I'll talk about our jobs to be done. When we identify consumer needs, we're not only focused on the functional need, although that's important, we're also looking at the emotional and social need driving consumers' engagement or helping us to understand why they're hiring and firing products. Let me give you a super quick example. Let's say we identify that many consumers are hiring plant-based protein shakes for an afternoon snack. And we find the functional need is a quick protein fix and some energy in the afternoon to get them past that slump. We also find that there's an emotional need at play. These consumers want to feel like they're making healthy decisions. They want to feel like they're engaged in self-care in their food choices. Furthermore, there's a social need at play. They're health conscious, but it's not just about nutrition. It's also signaling that they are trend forward and looking to be a bit influential in their peer group. So in this example, we're not only selling nutrition, but we're selling identity, belonging, and a sense of control for consumers. This belief-driven approach helps our brands, helps our clients connect with consumers on a more human and meaningful level. It helps to power smarter innovation, messaging, and strategy. Right, so to sum this all up, a traditional approach focuses on observable metrics like age, gender, and income. These are observed behaviors. We end up with static segments using self-reported data like surveys and interviews, sometimes landing with generalized messaging, and ultimately we end up focusing on an individual as an individual in isolation. And what I'm arguing is that an ethnographic approach can build on that. It can go beyond demographic markers to identify beliefs, values, the cultural context. We get the underlying motivations, the reason why. We can help to understand evolution and mindset using natural language analysis to produce context-rich narratives. And this is because we're not only focused on individuals in isolation, but we're looking at individuals within the broader cultural context. All right. So let's bring this to life. Let's look at this in practice. And I'm going to start with artificial intelligence as our case study. Artificial intelligence, or AI, has been a very hot topic this year. It is something the consumer insights team at Lux has been asked about many, many times. And it is also a really interesting case study in understanding why we need to go beyond demographics in thinking about both product development and messaging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by outlining a traditional approach, the insight that we get from a traditional approach, and then I'm going to build on that using our ethnographic observation. All right. So when it comes to a demographic approach to AI, it is helpful. It's a good starting point, as I mentioned. It allows us to zero in on the most engaged tech-forward audience who are typically young, urban, educated, digitally fluent, probably pretty hip, as well as tech savvy. Again, it could help us align innovation with the needs and behaviors of the people who are most likely to adopt it first, but we're running a risk here. And the risk is that we're going to miss opportunities to appeal to a broader audience by relying on some stereotypes, right? So again, going beyond demographics, we might note that these consumers want to stay ahead of the curve. They're curious. They get social capital from being in the know. And many are looking to build their own personal brand and get ahead at work through their future fluency. But here's the challenge. Not all Gen Zs are AI enthusiasts. Not all older consumers are laggards. And so we, as I said, we might miss some of the nuance that could lead to opportunities and white space, right? So this is a great starting point, but let's build on this. Moving beyond just a demographic approach to look at consumers' motivations, attitudes, values, and fears, we see that the lead consumer in this space is kind of cautiously optimistic about the potential of AI. They are motivated by a desire not only for individual progress, but for societal progress. They want to use AI to enhance human capabilities, revolutionize industries, and improve overall quality of life. So there's that drive for efficiency. There's that drive to maintain competitiveness in the workforce. But at the end of the day, there's also a desire to see AI used to augment human capabilities, right? There's a careful optimism when it comes to AI. They are enthusiastic, but they are aware of its pitfalls. They are concerned about ethics, economics, and other societal implications. They are afraid about the erosion of human skill and agency, the loss of control over personal and professional spheres. They are aware that AI raises some ethical dilemmas, and they're deeply concerned that AI could further entrench inequality and social divisions. They worry that unchecked AI development may lead to a future where economic benefits are unevenly distributed, where surveillance and automation undermine personal freedom, and where AI decision-making surpasses human judgment and results in some undesirable outcomes. Think about your favorite dystopian TV show, for example. So, given their motivations and values, really, if we're in this space and we're thinking about innovating in this space, we need to emphasize ethical design, transparency, and the enhancement of human skill, right? So if we think about some of the implications for this, these consumers would be interested in AI tools that facilitate upskilling and professional development, which is true. We would have seen that with our demographic approach as well. Things like AI coaching, apps, resume building apps, job skill development apps. We could take this a step further, given their focus on human capacity, to note that they'd be interested in using AI for other forms of skill development. AI in healthcare also looks very promising to them, but they're skeptical of, say, insurance companies using AI to determine payouts or claims, and instead they'd like to see AI used for better treatments, more personalized medicine, to help keep healthcare costs down, to help make it easier for healthcare professionals to offer high level of care. They'd be interested in things like an AI companion app, precision care technology, for example. Having greater access to their medical records is another simple example. They're also optimistic, and this is a little bit further out, but they're optimistic that AI could help to enhance sustainability. And the last thing I'll note here is that many of these consumers are especially interested in AI and co-creation. They want to be the driving force behind some of these innovations. They like the idea of platforms that can democratize AI, offer access and control to a broader segment of the population, thinking of things like a community AI studio, a platform where everyday users could build, customize, and deploy AI models for not only personal needs, but for community needs without complex coding. They're also looking for assurances around the ethics. They will need transparency in communication. They'll need a better understanding of how you, as an AI developer, are taking into account some of their concerns about unethical uses, right? So their interest in these products and services are driven by a desire to ensure that AI acts as a force for good. It's something that amplifies human potential, making life better and fairer rather than diminishing or replacing the human experience. All right, let's move on to our next case study. Our next case study is clean eating. And in this case study, I'm going to explain why thinking about clean eating from a motivational perspective can help us with some broader targeting. Again, I'm going to start by looking at a traditional approach and then continue to build on it with some ethnographic analysis. In our traditional approach, we see clean eating is very relevant to younger consumers, people under the age of 50, especially millennials and Gen Z. It's also something where we're seeing a skew towards higher income individuals. They have more money to afford premium products. They also typically have higher levels of education and are more ingredient or label savvy. Furthermore, as I said, they're highly educated. There's that correlation between education and clean eating preferences. And then if we got into some of their personality traits and lifestyle characteristics, we would note, of course, they're passionate about health and wellness. They're interested in longevity. We might even note that they practice yoga, meditation, breath work, potentially note that they like to make food at home, and smoothies are a cornerstone of their approach. Shopping at farmers markets is relevant. Drinking herbal tea and alkaline water. Now, of course, all of this is true, it's not wrong, but it's limiting. We're risking falling into the stereotype trap. Whereas if we take an ethnographic approach, we can build on this, and we actually see some really interesting motivations at play when it comes to that lead consumer. So yes, of course, they're interested in their health. They want to be healthier, have longer lives, enjoy their lives, and they want to have control over their health. But here's the piece that we didn't capture in our demographic approach. These are consumers who also feel like they get symbolic capital associated with purity and authenticity in clean eating. So there's a desire to get prestige and status through their food choices. Consumers who avoid processed food often gain this prestige and status within their circles by demonstrating their commitment to authenticity, to purity, to avoiding processed foods. It's seen as a marker of being informed, health conscious, disciplined, which can all elevate their social standing. This is also a group that is interested in advocacy. They want to be influencers. They want to encourage others to see the benefits of clean eating. And as such, they gain social capital from being the friend in their group who gives advice, who is on the cutting edge of new food trends. Not only that, but they want to take a holistic approach to their health. They're increasingly thinking about not just their body, but their mind, body, and even emotional connections. And as such, we see that many are increasingly taking a less strict approach to clean eating because it's overly rigorous, making it hard to maintain, making it hard to balance a holistic approach. So again, what does this mean when it comes to products or innovation, communication? Well, some product ideas coming out of this are things like single origin products, thinking of tea, coffee, chocolate, for example. And they appeal to the clean eating consumer's desire for authenticity, traceability, and that unique story that can create that kind of exclusivity, that prestige or status that they're looking for. But there's an opportunity here as well to appeal to consumers more broadly who love a good story associated with their food, right? We can go beyond just Gen Z or even just that small group of clean eating consumers to think about shared preferences or shared values that would make a product more appealing, right? And this would allow us to target any of the consumers who really value an origin story when it comes to their product, regardless of age, income. Furthermore, another example in this space would be something like innovative snack formats, right? Ways to help these consumers meet their clean eating goals with minimally processed ingredients. We could think of things like freeze-dried fruit and veggies, popped legumes, something that offers unique texture, a unique flavor, something that's a little different than what they expect. Again, these cater to this group of consumers who want to be seen as innovative and ahead of the curve. They can share these products with their friends, again, be seen as the influencer in their group, enhancing their status as somebody who's in the know. But these snacks also could align with a broader group's desire to start eating healthier, to look for a snack that doesn't compromise on taste or flavor or even convenience, for all of the consumers who are looking to make better food choices. So again, thinking beyond demographics allows us to think about how we could expand our audience. This type of snack could offer variety and excitement to anybody who's trying to take a better approach to their health or food. Okay. So we've talked about targeting, we've talked about the role of demographics, their limitations, how to use anthropology to overcome those limitations, and we've given a few examples. What are our big takeaways today? Well, one, the stakes are high. Consumer expectations are evolving and changing, and we need to stay ahead of those curves. We need to go beyond traditional demographics to understand and really get that deep understanding of the modern consumer. And that's where anthropology comes in. It helps us to create those more holistic personas that allow us to avoid stereotyping or even being seen as irrelevant because we're not ahead of the cultural curve. Better personas mean better targeting, which leads to more sustainable growth. And by sustainable growth, I just mean ongoing growth. And this is, again, because understanding our shared beliefs, understanding motivations, helps us to understand what drives behavior. It helps us to create a deeper connection to our consumer and therefore make better, more strategic decisions. So what can you do? A few things. Start to think about how you could segment consumers by values and not just demographics. What are the values of the targets that you're looking to? How could you further integrate some of these motivations into your innovation funnels? Think early stage innovation. What are consumer motivations, attitudes, values, and fears? Furthermore, use cultural signals, shifts in culture, and emerging trends to inform communication and design strategies. And then, of course, I urge you to talk to us about how we can help you to think about how motivations are driving your core consumers and how you can start to get ahead of the limitations of demographics. That's it for me. I'm going to turn things back to Alina to see if we have any questions from our audience.
Thank you, Cheryl. This was really, really captivating. So now we'll be taking questions that you may have on the presentation, which you can type into the question box. If we don't get to your question on this call, someone from Lux will be in touch after the webinar, just to write us your question. So let me see. Oh, I see quite a few questions here. Let me look for a good one for you, Cheryl. Okay. How do we measure the ROI or effectiveness of belief-driven targeting compared to traditional demographic targeting? That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Thank you for that question. I think, we'd use some of the similar metrics that we already use to determine if we're getting a good ROI. Conversion rate. Are our sales improving? To what extent? What's the sales lift by belief-based segmentation? We could also think about some of the brand awareness and sentiment measurements we do. How does belief-based segmentation or belief-based persona building improve brand awareness and sentiment related to our brand. I think beyond that, we could also use some internal metrics to think about our own research approaches and, how much money are we spending? Are we looking for ways to reduce spend? Are we doing more or less work? And I think, at Lux, we have a lot of ways to help our clients get better faster. Along those lines, I would also suggest, and I noted a couple of points in my presentation, that having a shared target, using shared language can also lead to cross-functional trust and alignment. And I think those are also some metrics that we can use to determine how successful our belief-based segmentation is, or how successful our research is in general.
All right. Do we have time for another one? Yeah. How can we integrate anthropological insights into our existing segmentation and innovation processes without starting from scratch?
Oh, that's a good question. I love that question. And in fact, that's something we actually do with our clients very regularly. We are very agile in our approach, meaning that we can work with our clients to augment existing data. And in fact, many of our clients will come to us with a pre-existing persona that they have built using demographic and behavioral information. And then they ask us, hey, can you help us to build this out a little further? Can you help us to get a little bit of a deeper understanding of why? What matters to this group of consumers and why does it matter to them? And we have a number of tools that allow us to build on research that's already been done, including our virtual anthropologist. And we also have an amazing team of analysts who can take some of that existing research and build on it. And that's exactly what I suggested in my presentation today, is demographics help give us that foundation, that skeleton, and exactly that we want to build on it. And so we can use some ethnographic analysis, we can use psychographics as well to help build on some of those existing research that we have. We can also just ask some additional questions. Again, we need to do it in a way that doesn't add a huge amount of runtime to our projects. But again, that's where AI-enabled tools can be really helpful in speeding up the research process without missing out on some of that nuance.
I think we have time for another one, a last one. Can you share examples where a belief-driven approach led to a successful product or campaign outcome?
Yeah, that's another great question. And I have to be careful on this one because I want to protect our clients' confidentiality. But one of my favorite examples is when we worked with a large retailer and their own brand. This is a little while ago, so it may not be as striking now, but we worked with them to better understand what are women's needs when it comes to swimsuits. And of course, swimsuits are a bit of a fraught space. We hear lots of women noting that it's not their favorite thing to buy. And what we uncovered was not surprising today, but at the time it wasn't as well known, was that many plus-size women were really disappointed with existing swimwear. And part of their disappointment was stemming from the fact that it didn't make them feel confident. Their desire, their motivation was to feel confident in their own body in a revealing swimsuit. And as a result, the key insight was that, we need to design for different body shapes and sizes to help deliver against that desire for more confidence. Again, with the rise of body positivity, it's probably not shocking, but at the same time, it is a deep need that many people have. Another example is some of the work that we've done with some restaurants where we've helped with their advertising campaign. And what we've done is help them to understand consumers' mindsets, understand those deep beliefs that drive them to engage with a trend or fandom in an effort to help create campaigns that are more resonant. And I'm not going to give it any specific examples, but I assure you there's a number of advertisements that you've seen where we've helped our clients to get to that belief-based understanding. And then they use that information to ensure that they're not just targeting Gen Z as a monolithic, but looking to the consumers that really are engaged in a fandom, really engaged in something that they can collaborate in. And my final example is we helped to introduce some new flavors to America's favorite condiments by, again, looking deeper at the beliefs driving consumer engagement in the condiment space beyond the functional need for flavor. But what else was really going on? The desire for more globally inspired flavors to help feel more worldly or more sophisticated, even if they can't leave home. I hope that those are helpful examples, but I'm always happy if people reach out to me and want to discuss this a little bit further.
Thanks, Cheryl. Well, that concludes our webinar for today. And the slide presentation and recording from this webinar will be sent to all attendees via email today. So after leaving the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate any feedback that you may have to help inform and improve future webinars. So take a moment and check out our upcoming webinars, and thanks for joining us, and have a great day.